Here we are again, everyone. This is Dr. Jenkins for Biology 109 Lab. This week is all about the bones, folks. All about the bones. So in addition to learning some of the names of the major bones, to make it kind of a more fun lab, I know you probably don't think lab is fun, but to make it a little more interesting, we've put together a lab where you get to investigate some of the bones to determine a bone's gender and ethnicity. All right, so I'm going to let you go through the lab. Just as usual, I want to talk about some of the most important points, and this should say fall. Oops. All right, so you can read about the beginning. Now I've got some links here, so I want you to read through the functions of the skeletal system. And then, as I said, we're going to investigate bones. So for example, if, God forbid, someone is killed or dies and the bones are left, even after years, you can look at those bones and you can determine quite a bit of information about who that person was. One of them is to determine the sex, right? The biological sex. So we've got a video for you to watch here, and I helped you out. I saved you 2.5 minutes of your time. Now, come on, that's pretty nice. And what they're going to do is they're going to go over the skull and they're going to go over the pelvis, because these are the two bones or two parts of the body that we look at and we can determine sex. For example, you can look at the pelvis, In a female pelvis, it's wider in the opening. It's also wider to the edges here because the female's pelvis is designed for childbirth, where a male is not as wide and they're actually taller because their pelvis is really designed for strength. There's many more, and as a matter of fact, you're going to fill in some of the characteristics. In terms of the skull, cranium is another word for skull. You're going to look at the difference between a male and a female in their frontal profile or brow. And all of these things can be found in the video. In addition to determining sex, there are certain characteristics of bones that can also help us to identify ethnicity of a skeleton. We can do so through a skull, and the short little video there is going to explain that to you. We can also do it through a bone near the pelvis called the sacrum. And here I'm going to ask you to do some measurements. So there's a formula, here it is, the sacral index, where you're going to take the sacral anterior breadth times 100 and then divide that by the sacral anterior height. I've given you some sample numbers, and then once you get your answer from this sacral index formula, you can look here and determine if it's a male or a female and what ethnicity it may have been. All right, and the last part, of course, is learning the bones themselves. This website talks about the types of bones: long, short, flat, irregular. Make sure you look at that. Again, anything that I'm pointing out or putting in red is all fair game for our lab quiz. And then we have a list of bones. You might look at this list and think, oh my God, it's so long. But I want to tell you, there's actually 203 bones in the human body. So this list is much less than 203. So I think you're going to be happy. I'm not going to go over all of them because I know that we learn better. Instead of me just sitting here, here's the femur, here's the tibia, here's the fibula. You're going to learn more by going through it yourself. I've given you some websites to help study. I've given you some websites for some practice quizzes. On your lab assignment for this week, you're going to answer some questions. You're going to fill in some of the tables that I already showed you. And then I'm going to be asking you to label only some of the bones. All right? Let me give you some tips here. Be careful with tibia and fibula. A lot of times people miss up the spelling of that. tibia is the larger bone. So see, it's the larger bone in the lower leg, tibia. And then the fibula is the more lateral one and the smaller bone. And oftentimes people mix up these words. Spelling counts, folks. So I need you to get pretty close. If we look at the radius and ulna, these are the forearm bones. The way that I remember this is that the ulna is always the same side as the pinky. So if you can put together ulna and pinky, no matter how the hand is turned, because you know you can put your palm forward, you can put your palm towards the back. No matter how you turn your hand, we know that the ulna is always by the pinky. You can think of up, UP, right? And that means that the radius is always going to be on the thumb side. Always on the thumb side. Last tip I want to give you would be the carpals versus the tarsals. When you look at tarsals, think about T for toe, because these are the bones in the ankle, near the toes. Tarsals. Whereas the carpals, we think about the hand or wrist, because the carpals are the bones of the wrist. So T for toe, tarsals. Carpal, some people, it helps to think about carpal tunnel. And when you think about carpal tunnel, you know you're thinking about the wrist. All right, folks, good luck. If you have any questions, I'm always here.